In order to make the 19-year-old delinquent change his ways, the man locked him in the basement for several months. The delinquent was chained like a dog, and no matter how hard he struggled, he could not break free from the chain. But if he listened to the guidance and education, the man would lengthen the chain and give him a little more space to move around. Otherwise, he would receive a harsh beating.
Bad boy! 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 Bad boy!
The man's method looks extremely radical, but when you watch until the end, you will discover that the truly extreme one is his thin and seemingly harmless wife. If you feel sorry for this teenager, then you might as well take a look at the things he did before he was brought here, at an age when he should have been studying hard or just starting to step into society. Tommy neither studied nor worked. He only spent his days wandering around nightclubs and indulging himself in a world of intoxicating substances. He also caused trouble everywhere, relieving himself in public places, stealing things, bullying the weak, and doing almost every bad thing imaginable. And describing him as completely lawless would not be an exaggeration. However, such a hopeless person happened to be targeted by a family that absolutely follows rules on this very night. Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about the newly released British series Good Boy. Not long after Tommy was kidnapped, Chris interviewed a cleaner, and his requirements for the cleaner were extremely strict. There could be no addictive habits of any kind, and even tattoos were not allowed.
It's important we hire someone without any addictions.
I don't have any addictions.
Just like that, Rena was successfully hired and came to the house for her first cleaning the next day. But she did not expect the employer to be this strict. When entering the house, she had to be checked with a detector, and she was not allowed to carry a phone while working. The phone had to be locked in a safe by the door. Although she could tell that this whole set of procedures was very unusual, Rena desperately needed money right now, and Chris looked like an honest man. His young son was also very well behaved. This family did not seem like bad people, so she decided to accept the job. It was not until Chris brought her to the basement and she saw the imprisoned Tommy that Rena finally understood why the requirements were so strict. She immediately wanted to refuse the job, but Chris followed after her and said, "Thank you for not screaming. It is not what you think it is. We only want to teach this child properly, and I promise no one will be harmed in this house." Seeing that Rena still insisted on leaving, Chris had no choice but to say that he had looked into her background.
I don't know what you mean.
I mean, especially with your removal order.
That is being reconsidered.
I'm sure it is. But with your past, it might not be so easy for a girl from Macedonia.
Although the film never directly explains what Rena had experienced, the narrator looked up the place called Macedonia, where the social status of women is very low, and harmful customs such as child marriage and forced marriage still exist. Chris said he would not judge Rena's past and believed that the things she did back then were forced by circumstances. Perhaps it was difficult for her to find a job, or perhaps it was Chris's respect. In the end, Rena decided to accept the job and agreed to come twice a week for cleaning. Chris gave her a set of cleaning tools, and inside it there was also pepper spray and an electric baton for self-defense. Soon, Tommy noticed the new cleaner Rena and begged her to help rescue him, but Rena acted as if she were deaf and completely ignored his request. After Rena left, Chris brought dinner to Tommy, but Tommy rudely knocked the food over and even said that when he escaped he would crush his head. Not long after, Chris pushed in a television and began playing videos that Tommy had posted online before. In the video, Tommy drove a stolen car at high speed and crashed into a streetlight by the road. Yet Tommy enjoyed it greatly and was amazed at how high the video's view count was. Looking extremely proud, Chris said with a serious face, "What you did was criminal damage, driving under the influence, taking someone's car without the owner's permission, and it was extremely reckless and dangerous." Then he played a traffic safety education video that he and his son had filmed themselves, hoping Tommy would understand that such behavior was wrong. But this method had absolutely no educational effect on Tommy. After Chris left, he jumped around like a monkey, trying to break free from the lock above him, but accidentally kicked over the chamber pot beside him and splashed himself with it. The next morning arrived. Chris believed Tommy's first lesson had gone very smoothly, so he went down with his wife to check on him. But the moment they came in, Tommy threw his pants toward them.
Catherine! go upstairs, please.
Chris immediately ran upstairs to apologize to Catherine and prepared bathwater for her. From the way he treated her with such respect, it was clear that he truly treated his wife like a princess, and he would never forgive anyone who disrespected the princess. Soon he carried a box of tools down to the basement and declared that he did not like Tommy's offense toward his wife, and demanded that Tommy apologize to Catherine, but Tommy continued to attack them with endless insults.
I'm gonna rip off your skull. I'm gonna rip off your wife's skull and make your son shit. Your weird little ugly son. I'll take every single.
The next morning, when Rena returned again for cleaning, Tommy used extremely vicious words to attack her. Chris came downstairs and saw Rena with tears in her eyes. He asked if Tommy had been rude to you, and then he turned to educate Tommy. In this house, everyone must respect each other, and you must apologize to this lady. At first, Tommy was very unwilling, but when Chris stepped closer, he became frightened. Perhaps he was scared by what happened the previous night, and quickly said sorry to Rena.
Brought you some painkillers. And Sunshine has prepared a little surprise for you. Tommy. We're not psychopaths.
It turned out that the son's little surprise was that he wanted to watch a movie together with Tommy. Originally, Chris had arranged an inspirational film about courage and friendship, but the son said he wanted to watch another filmcast instead, because that was Jonathan's favorite movie. Jonathan never actually appears in the film, but his shadow seems to exist everywhere, as if he was once an original member of this family. Not long after, Catherine was attracted by the familiar melody of the movie from downstairs and walked down. From her expression, it was not difficult to tell that she must miss Jonathan very much. And just like that, the family of four quietly watched Jonathan's favorite movie together. But while watching, Tommy's eyes began to fill with tears and he said, "I have had enough. I want to go down. Is it not miserable enough that I am locked in a dungeon? And now you are making me watch such a depressing movie?" After saying that, he stood up and asked to be taken down to sleep. That night, Catherine expressed her longing for Jonathan to Chris.
I dreamt about him again last night. He was walking through the gate up the driveway, and he was coming up to visit us, and he looked so healthy, so happy.
On this day, the basement once again played educational videos teaching Tommy not to touch things that can lead to addiction. But these sounds tortured Tommy like a tightening spell, and he tried every possible way to turn off the television, struggling from sunrise until nightfall, only to finally realize that there was absolutely no way for him to escape this cage. At this moment, he finally realized how weak and helpless he was in front of this strange couple. He changed his usual violent temper and took the initiative to apologize to Catherine, though his eyes still carried a trace of helplessness and unwillingness.
I am very ashamed of myself, and I promise not to do it again.
Although Catherine accepted the apology, the education did not end because of it. Chris pushed the television in once again, which made Tommy extremely impatient. But just when he felt very helpless, Catherine brought a box over. She had noticed that Tommy squinted his eyes while watching the movie and guessed that he must be nearsighted. So she tried several pairs of glasses on him one by one.
This shit's HD. As if. I can see everything well better.
Tommy no longer showed the impatience from before. Instead, he was touched by Catherine's thoughtfulness and sincerely said thank you. Seeing that Tommy had become much more obedient, Chris lengthened the chain a little, allowing him to use the toilet next door. Catherine was even worried that he might be bored, so she gave him a book. But Tommy did not want to read and did not like reading.
Who reads books?
Look carefully at their eyes. These simple looks were enough to show that Tommy clearly understood he could not disrespect Catherine, otherwise Chris would punish him again. At this moment, the doorbell upstairs suddenly rang. Chris quickly took out the electric baton and pointed it at the chain, telling Catherine to go upstairs to see what was happening, and signaling Tommy not to make any sound. It turned out to be only a delivery driver, because the son had opened the gate of the yard without permission, which allowed the courier to come to the front door. Soon it was the day for Rena to come clean again. Tommy asked her if she had cigarettes, but she did not. so he asked for a pack of chewing gum instead, and this later became an important tool for his escape. At noon, Chris brought him food, and Tommy asked if he had become tired of going to work, so he locked me here just to torment me. Chris said, "Someone with a criminal record like you has no right to say the word torment." Tommy said confidently, "I would never randomly grab a teenager from the street and lock him in a basement. Do not put me in the same category as you. Is that really the truth?" After watching the next video, he would not think that way anymore. This time it was still a recording he had posted online before. In the video, he and several friends caught a young boy on the street, grabbed the boy's phone and smashed it on the ground, then asked the boy if he was scared and whether he wanted to find his mother. And the next sentence that followed pierced straight into the heart.
You're on your own. No one's coming. No one's coming to save you now.
Seeing it this way, he truly could be put in the same category as Chris, because he had also bullied the weak on the street before. Only after experiencing it himself did he realize how terribly wrong he had been. And in order to test his reliability, Chris even replaced the plastic utensils with metal ones. After trying this for several days, Tommy never secretly hid the utensils, and it seemed that he had already given up the idea of escaping. Because of this, the family prepared another surprise for Tommy. They celebrated his birthday together. The original story never mentioned his birthday. Perhaps this was simply a special day the family created for him. After eating the cake, Chris said that another surprise was waiting for him.
What's that? Are you joking? Me head wrecks after that, can you not?
Oh, no. We promise that you won't regret it, will he?
In the blink of an eye, Tommy woke up in the middle of a vast grassland, and the other surprise turned out to be taking him out for a camping trip. The family seemed to be slowly treating him as part of the household. Although he was still tied with a long iron chain, it did not affect Tommy from joining this pleasant camping trip at all. He noticed the barbecue tools Chris was using, and it seemed that he was secretly planning something, but he did not dare reveal any sign of it, and instead he ran over to play with the younger brother. After the camping trip ended, Tommy stared at the grassland for a long time. Perhaps he felt that he might not have another chance to come out and see the world. Yet he joked humorously that it was such a pity, and he very cooperatively let Catherine cover his mouth and nose. However, what he did not expect was that when he woke up again, he was not in the basement, but in a completely unfamiliar room. It turned out that the family's trust in him had already allowed him to move around all the spaces inside the house, but this was still not absolute freedom. He was still chained, and there were multiple coded locks along the rail, and he could only go to different areas with permission.
Well, I am still on a lead, aren't I?
Please don't see it as a sign of distrust. Look at it the other way, as a sign of our trust in you and the progress you've made. Yesterday you were in the cellar and now you can roam around the house. And besides, trust isn't black and white. Trust is... it's a process. And it has to be built. We really are so happy with the wonderful guy you're turning out to be, Tommy. Really, you make us so proud. So proud that I gave you my special bell.
Catherine and Chris seemed to be using their own method to make Tommy understand that there is no absolute freedom in this world. Only by following rules can one live freely, and only then can one live with dignity. And Tommy, who had grown up without love, gradually received more warmth and a certain level of respect in his family. And even the look in his eyes became more gentle. One day Tommy tentatively asked Rena what the code for the rail locks was, but Rena simply smiled and said she had forgotten. And Tommy could not ask any further, so he jokingly accepted it and said, "You must want me to stay here with you. That is why you say that." In the evening, Catherine noticed that Rena had not gone home even though her work time had ended. And she asked Rena, "Normally the moment your shift ends you rush out the door. Why are you still working today?" Catherine realized that Rena was facing some kind of trouble, so she immediately sent her son away and invited Rena to sit down and talk. Only then did Rena admit that someone seemed to be following her these past few days. She suspected it was people from her past who had come looking for her, and she did not know where she could hide. But to her surprise, Catherine said that she could stay and live here.
No, I couldn't.
I won't take no for an answer, Rena.
There's a shelter I can go to in town.
Oh, no.
They helped me move.
You don't need charity when you have family. We're your family.
It's really like an upmarket travel lodge down there. Just avoid sniffing anything they put near your nose.
Tommy.
Stay with us.
And just like that, this household gained another member. On this day, Tommy looked at Catherine standing in the yard lost in thought and suddenly asked Chris, "What do you and your wife usually do together? Because you two are not like other couples. You seem to be controlled very strictly. Have you never thought about changing that?" Chris replied that it was none of his business, and he had better not ask. But that night, Chris took the initiative to find Tommy and said he had seriously considered Tommy's question, and that he really should create something romantic for Catherine, but he would need Tommy and Rena's cooperation. So the group made a plan. Chris, Rena, and the son would prepare the setting, while Tommy would distract Catherine by talking with her alone. And since he had been reading To Kill a Mockingbird, there were some parts he did not understand and wanted Catherine to explain.
They're all off their face in that place, right?
Yes,
Getting absolutely fucked.
that's right.
And they're so fucked up, they don't worry about now. Because if you're off your head all the time, why do anything about it? Do you know what I mean?
Which is better? Blissful stupor or dealing with sober reality?
Yeah, I get it.
Catherine began teaching Tommy that addictive things are a kind of escape. They allow people to escape from their troubles, and even from everything in their lives. You will begin to escape from everyone, including the family who loves you, and at the same time you will hurt the people who love you. Not long afterward, Catherine brought Tommy back to the first floor, and only then did she discover that everyone had prepared a surprise for her. Looking at the romantic scene in front of him, Tommy could not help but shed tears. He had to admit that he had already grown fond of this family, but deep down he remained very clear-minded. He had to leave, because this opportunity might never come again. He begged Rena to hand him the barbecue skewer from the kitchen. Rena did not dare to do that, but she also felt reluctant to refuse him, so she simply pulled open the drawer and let him take it himself. With no other choice, Tommy had to do it himself. But he did not escape immediately. Instead, he hid the skewer inside a flower pot. That night, Chris thanked Tommy for his suggestion and said that it had been many years since he had seen his wife this happy.
Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You did all of this. For her. Why me?
What do you mean?
Why did you take me? I know someone else used to live here. I know you kept another guy chained up here before me.
Never kept anyone here. No one else was chained up.
What did you do to him?
You don't know what you're talking about.
The next day, Chris went out to work, but when he left the house, he did not notice that a car had stopped at the front gate behind him. At that moment, Tommy was inside playing chess with the younger brother, while Rena and Catherine were outside cleaning fallen leaves. When several strong men suddenly broke in looking for Rena, the two women quickly ran back into the house, and as the only grown man in the house at that moment, Tommy instinctively stepped forward to block them. But Rena cried and said she was sorry. "Those men are my family, and I think I have to pack my things and go back with them."
Get off it!
Rena was taken away by her family, and Tommy was beaten because of it. After Chris learned about what happened, he thanked Tommy sincerely and felt relieved. He said, "I am proud of you. Today you behaved like a real man and protected this family." Chris promised that this kind of thing would never happen again, and that tomorrow he would install surveillance cameras, motion sensors, security bars, and other protection systems around the house.
You can help me? We'll do it together. Like father and son.
Yeah.
But what Chris did not know was that Tommy planned to leave this house tonight. He took out the chewing gum he had hidden under the table and stuck it onto the bell around his neck to prevent it from making noise. Then he stood on a book to reach higher and unlock the clasp on the rail, and finally took out the barbecue skewer he had hidden earlier. The noise woke Chris up, and when he entered the room he realized that Tommy had escaped. so he quickly grabbed a gun and chased after him. Chris spoke calmly and said, "The key to the door is with me. Keep your voice down and do not wake Catherine." Even when Tommy pointed the gun at him, he still said patiently, "You did very well. I am proud of you. Can you give the gun back to me?" At that moment, Catherine walked downstairs, but Tommy did not dare to point the gun at her. Catherine touched his chest and said, "In fact, you do not really want to leave here." Tommy surprisingly handed the gun back obediently, and he said, "But you are not my family. All of this is fake. You locked me in the basement, but I am who I am. I am a living person, not your dog and not your puppet."
I want to leave.
Do you want a television?
No! I want to go home!
Seeing that kindness did not work, Catherine then tried to appeal to his emotions by mentioning the younger brother. Tommy said, "The younger brother is a good kid, but you have ruined his mind just like what you did to the other child. And that room does not belong to me at all. It belongs to another boy. Although I do not know what you did to him, I will never become him. Do you not understand that?" At this point, Chris finally gave up. He opened the door and said to Catherine, "It is over. Just let him go."
Remember what happened last time? No. Catherine, no, please! No.
Tommy ran for a long time until he collapsed from exhaustion on the road and was later rescued. During his time in the hospital, he called the police and said that someone had imprisoned him as a replacement for their son. But after he was discharged from the hospital, when officers came to investigate, he said that he had made the story up while he was not thinking clearly in the hospital, and that in reality he had just gone out and disappeared for a while. While answering the officers' questions, he glanced at his mother, who was busy playing with her phone. Yet the people on his mind were Catherine and her family. When the officers realized they could not get any useful information, they said they would cancel the missing person report.
You didn't have to report me.
Did you report him too?
His mother said that she had only sent him a few messages looking for him and had never reported him missing. After asking further questions, they learned that it was actually his former girlfriend who had reported him missing. At that moment, Tommy finally realized that his mother truly did not care about him. And this might also be the reason why he had been so lawless before, because no parent had ever taught him right from wrong. His own mother cared less about him than his girlfriend did, and even less than Catherine's family. After thinking it over again and again, he went to find his girlfriend, and at that time she was still living the same life he used to live. He could not bear to see her continue sinking into that life, and he made the same decision Chris once made.
Where are we going?
Put that on.
Tommy brought his girlfriend to a remote wilderness, and after getting her consent, he made her fall asleep, burned the car, and carried her back home. At that moment, they finally welcomed their son home, and there was also another new member of the family. This is the entire story of the new film Good Boy. The film leaves many questions for the audience to wonder about. For example, who exactly was Jonathan? Was he their eldest son? Or was he also a boy taken from the street just like Tommy? What exactly did Jonathan experience in this house? From the expression on Catherine's face when she taught Tommy not to become addicted to harmful substances, it seems that she was remembering Jonathan. Perhaps Jonathan really was their eldest son, but after falling into many bad habits, he became rebellious and impossible to guide, and eventually ran away from home. Then, before Tommy, were there other people who had also been kept here? From the large box of glasses that Catherine had, it seems possible that there were, because the first pair Tommy tried did not allow him to see clearly, and only the second pair worked. But it could also be explained that those were glasses Jonathan used before, since vision usually becomes worse over time. Perhaps they all belonged to Jonathan. Alright, that is the end of today's story, and we will see you in the next episode.